You are listening to Yes, That Really Happened, a semi-monthly absurd history podcast. We are your hosts, Joshua
and Steven.
Welcome to
Hello.
the podcast that you're always on.
Yep, pretty accurate. All of 2 episodes now.
Hey, but we're hip and happening. We're about to boom. Going to record a lot more.
Hip and happening, about to boom.
That's right. I'm clearly on the cutting edge of what's popular, as you can tell by my lingo. I'm down with the youths. I know what everyone's saying. And speaking of saying, we normally start by a question to get us on topic. So, Steve, I have a question for you. I'm actually going to cheat. I have 2 questions for you. First one, who do you think of? Who comes to mind when I say world powers? What are the major world powers?
Currently, or?
Yeah, currently.
Superpowers are just world powers.
Like the superpower.
The superpower right now is the United States.
Yeah. Okay, how about 1700? Who would you guess would be the big world powers?
Probably France and England.
Okay, now where would you put Sweden? This week we are discussing Charles XII, King of Sweden, and the Great Northern War.
Didn't you send me a bunch of videos about King Charles XII?
Yes, I'm sure I did. I sent you some videos on King Charles XII, and a lot of today is actually going to come from Extra History series on King Charles and the Great Northern War. They have a great entertaining video series, so definitely check that out after you listen to this, as we're going to be talking about the King of Sweden at a time where Sweden is one of the biggest world powers. So in the late 1600s, in 1682, Charles XII was born, and at this time, Sweden is one of the world powers. And Europe looked pretty different than it does today. So France and Spain and Portugal, they all look pretty much the same as they do today in 1682. They haven't changed that much. They will change a lot, but what they looked like then is pretty much what they look like now. But Sweden is one of the great world powers, but Sweden has very different borders then than they do today. In the 1600s, Sweden controls what is today Finland, part of Denmark, Western Russia, Latvia, and Estonia. Denmark was also bigger then. In fact, at the time, it was Denmark-Norway, and they were united by one monarch. And whenever you see that in history, when you have Denmark-Norway, you have 2 countries' names connected by a hyphen, it's because they are technically separate nations with separate governments, but they share a monarch. And so Denmark-Norway shares one monarch. What is modern Poland was Poland-Lithuania, and they controlled more than they do today. What is modern-day Belarus was split between Poland, Lithuania, and Russia. What is currently Ukraine was split 3 ways between Poland, Lithuania, Russia, and the Ottoman Empire. Poland, Lithuania, they are led by one monarch, and it's an elected monarch. It's not a hereditary monarch. And so they actually had comparatively little power to the other monarchs of England. Southern Europe and North America are all ruled... Southern Europe and Northern Africa are all ruled by the Ottoman Empire. Germany isn't Germany. It's the Holy Roman Empire. And as Voltaire famously said, the Holy Roman Empire was not Holy Roman nor an empire. It was an elected emperor, so it was made up of many states, and the head and the chief of those little states were the electorate or king, and they had the ability to elect the new emperor when the emperor died. And so you have a series of Germanic states wrapped up in the Holy Roman Empire. And during the late 1600s and 1700s, Italy is not a nation, it's a series of Italian states, and they will not unite until a little before the First World War. And so you have France, Spain, and Portugal, like I said. Their borders pretty much resemble what they do today. And England is complicated. Our story starts in 1682, really in 1700. And at the time, England and Scotland and Ireland are all technically separate. So England and Scotland share a monarch at this time, but they do not share government. It will not be until 1707 when Scotland and England will unite as Great Britain. And it will not be until 1801 that Ireland joins and it becomes the United Kingdom. And because I know we're Americans, we tend to use those 3 titles interchangeably. Or
What,
but
you mean Ireland, Scotland, England? Hold on. What were the titles?
England, Great Britain, and the United Kingdom.
Yeah. Sorry. But yeah, we do use those
But
interchangeably.
England is England. Great Britain is...
Sorry, I had brain fog a little bit.
That's fine. Great Britain is when England and Scotland merged. And then the UK is England, Scotland, and Ireland. And so a lot of this comes from the first recorded name given for the island by Julius Caesar, Britannia. But at the beginning of today's story, it will be England, and about halfway through, it will become Great Britain. So if you hear me say England at one point and Great Britain at the other, it's because at some point they will unite. But so we have Sweden as one of the greatest empires in the world at this time, as the IKEA empire is going strong, and we have some political tensions. Denmark, Norway's king, Frederick IV, is angry at Sweden. Denmark used to hold land in southern Sweden before they took it, so he wants that back. Peter the Great of Russia, which, side note, he was 6'8".
Wait, really?
Yes.
Weren't people supposed to be shorter back then?
Yeah, but you just have these random people who, like Abraham Lincoln, who not only was tall for back then, but he's tall by today's standards as well.
Yeah, there are pictures of him like with head and shoulders taller than other people.
Yeah, he didn't even need his hat. But yeah, so Peter the Great of Russia, he was infatuated with the West. He saw that the West was rapidly industrializing. And even though the Industrial Revolution wouldn't happen yet, he could tell it is going to happen. We're starting to see the moving away from an agricultural society and people starting to move into the cities. And he sees that, and he wants Russia to not be left behind. He wants Russia to join the great European economy. But there's a big problem.
Wasn't Russia medieval all the way up into World War One? They still had like peasants and fiefs.
And so, yeah, they have what's called serfdom, serfs.
Serfs, that's what.
And while serfs were technically free, they were but slaves and all but name only, leading up to the First World War. And that's why you get, during the First World War, Germany shipping linen back into Russia and just revolution happening all over the place. The czars executed.
They knew that Lenin was a revolutionary.
Oh, yeah.
And they were hoping that if they freed him and sent him back to Russia, that he'd cause civil unrest in Russia.
And he'd cause the second revolution, because you have the first revolution that overthrows the czars, but then when they're not doing so well, you have Lenin overthrowing them.
Well, the reason why there was a vote. It was a democratic vote, what the government was gonna be like, and the vote turned out to be that most people voted for it to become a republic, or a democratic republic. And Lenin didn't like that. He wanted it to be a communist. He was so confident that the people were going to be voting for communism, and when that didn't happen, he stormed the government capital with a lot of militia with guns and stuff.
And it's funny, he called his party the majority, and the other party the minority. But guess which one had the most people and members?
The minority.
Yep. But anyway, you're right. But in this time, this is long before Lenin. This is a couple hundred years before all of that. Lenin, or Lenin, as I keep accidentally saying. So it's a couple hundred years before that. But Peter the Great, Tsar of Russia, he wants to westernize Russia, but he has one problem. He needs a port. In the Baltic Sea, he has no land touching the Baltic Sea. That is controlled by the Swedish Empire. At one point, it belonged to Russia, but the Swedish Empire had it, and he needed that back to build a port and trade with the West and with Europe.
What was Russia's capital at the time?
Okay, I think it's Moscow.
Because I know it changes because of this war.
Yes, it will change because of this war. But I think it is Moscow at the time. I'm going to say it's Moscow at the time because that will tie into our story here in a little bit. But yeah, so he needs a port on the Baltic, land that Sweden owns. And then more political tensions arise with Poland and Lithuania. Augustus II, he's the king of Poland and Lithuania, and he's the elector of Saxony. Saxony being one of those German states inside the Holy Roman Empire. But he's not a hereditary monarch. He wants to be a hereditary monarch. He wants more power, and he wants to be able to create a dynasty he can pass on. What is he to do? Livonia. They're there on the Baltic. That's part of what Sweden owns. And some people in Livonia, a rich guy, reaches out to Augustus of Poland, Lithuania, and says, look, if you free us from Sweden, we will make you an hereditary monarch of Livonia. And Augustus hears that and says, if I could be made the hereditary king there, then that might be enough leverage for me to be able to turn all of Poland, Lithuania into my hereditary kingdom.
What was the king of Sweden at the time?
He is Charles XI.
Okay, so Charles was only, 15 at the time?
Oh, Charles XII is about to become king at 15. We're not to him yet.
Okay. So
This is just...
So he decides to poke Sweden before...
No, I'm just giving you background information.
No, I'm kind of confused because I thought...
No war's broken out yet.
I know, but the rich man's reached out to
yeah. He reached out before the king died.
And he just hasn't... And the one dude hasn't decided... Yet. Okay.
Yeah, sorry. This is just background to the man, the myth, the legend, and the war that we'll be talking about.
You always say that. The man, the myth, the legend.
Yeah, this man is that. So, basically, we have 3 rulers and 3 powers that all want a bite of the IKEA apple.
IKEA apple. I imagine that does not taste good.
They want some of Sweden.
It'll be wooden nails.
That's right. They want part of that. And so they all want a part of that. And in 1697, they see their opportunity. But before we get to that, any questions? Because I know I probably explained that confusing about what the world's like at the time.
Not really.
Okay, so that's the world at the time our story picks up in 1697. In 1697, King Charles XI of Sweden dies of stomach cancer. This leaves his 15-year-old son, Charles XII, to inherit the throne. This kid is what the world sees as their opportunity. Because historically, what happens when a child, takes the throne?
Usually the country falls apart, or the child becomes a puppet figure.
Yeah. Everyone sees this as their opportunity. Sweden is weak. Just a kid has taken the throne. And, fun fact, Charles XII of Sweden, guess what number, how many kings Sweden had by the name of Charles?
You said 12, so 12.
6.
On. So Charles XII was not in fact Charles XII, but Charles VI.
You know what the name was based off of?
What?
Swedish mythology. There were other Charleses in Swedish mythology, and so they were counting those as well as the actual kings.
It reminds me of China almost, because they do stuff like that.
Yeah, so unlike in England, they base their numbers not just on Swedish history, but also mythology. So he is Charles XII, or as he would actually have been called in Sweden by their own language, Carl XII.
Carl?
Yep. In English, it's Charles. And he is also called, and I think this is the coolest name of the 3, but you can tell me if you disagree, Carolus Rex.
Wouldn't that be like Latinish?
Yep, that's Latin.
Okay.
Carolus Rex.
I thought so.
And if you Google Charles XII, or Carl XII, or Carolus Rex, no 2 portraits of him look alike. I just found that minor nitpick I put out there. He looks a little different in all of his portraits. And you can also find a picture of his head when it was exhumed 100 years ago and autopsied. But don't look at that because that'll spoil that he died.
Oh, I know. I watched all the things that you sent me.
Okay. Oh, no, so you know what? Okay, anyway.
Yes, I know everything that you're going to talk about.
That's all right. Hopefully I'll bring in some new information that I have put some information that's not in those videos. But again, check out Extra History series, The Great Northern War. A lot of what I have comes from them. They have just great stuff on this topic. But so you have Carolus Rex, 15 years, coming to the throne. And for kicks and giggles, I copied and pasted from Wikipedia his entire full Swedish royal title. You want to hear it?
Sure.
The Sovereign and Supreme Lord Charles XII, by the grace of God, King of Sweden, the Goths and the Winds, Grand Duke of Finland, Duke of Sudermania, Uplandia, Westmania, Declaria, Scania, Smolandia, Ostrogothia.
There's a lot of E's.
Westergothia, Bohusia, Suderfinlandia, Tavastia, Norfinlandia, Estonia, Livonia. Take note of Livonia, because again, that's what the Poland-Lithuania is about to come knocking for. Karelia, Berman, Verden, Stettin, Pomeranian, and the Casubas of Winden, Count of Nursia, or Melandia, Ingia, Hollandia, Gothlandia, Hollandia, Dahlia, and by the way, I'm sure I'm mispronouncing 99% of these names. Gastrixia, Herdalia, Gimatia, Laponia, Medelpadia, and Germania, Bithynia, Ostrobothvania, Nalandia, Alandia, Prince of Rugen, Lord of Ingria, Narva, and Wismar, and also Count Palatine by the Rhine, Duke of Bavaria, Count of Zweibrücken, Kleberg, as well as Duke of Jülich, Cleves, which is notable for being the home of Henry VIII of England's fourth wife, and Berg, Count of Valdense, Spanheim, and Ravensburg, Lord of Ravenstein. Just that short little title.
There was a lot of ears in that.
Yep, and a lot of names I mispronounce. But we're just going to call him Charles XII. So normally, young monarchs, as you said, are puppets and pushovers. But let me tell you, Stevie, as if you don't already know, not this lad. So Poland, Lithuania, Denmark, Norway, and Russia form a three-part alliance against Sweden. But Russia can't join right away. Peter the Great wanted to wait until his war with the Ottomans was done before declaring war again. But in 1700, Poland, Lithuania, and Denmark, Norway were tired of waiting. They strike. 14,000 troops of Poland, Lithuania invade Livonia, but the Swedes defeat them right away and kill their general. Denmark, Norway invades southern Sweden. And Charles, he raises funds from his own people as well as from England. He personally led his people against the Danes. This king, who's a teenager, this boy, personally led them in a naval invasion of Denmark and beat them so badly that they pulled out of the alliance and dropped out of the war altogether.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, so this teenage kid leads his troops, knocks Denmark out right away. And now he's looking over at Livonia and wanting to take that territory back. And at the same time, Russia finally has peace with the Ottoman Empire, and Peter the Great sends a massive army of 40,000 troops to support Poland, Lithuania, and Livonia. We'll be hearing a lot of these EAs.
Noticed.
Yeah. And that's two things you can count on in this story. A lot of EAs, and you can also count on Russia always having a lot of manpower.
Funny enough, Russia, historically has always had a lot of manpower, but they don't use that manpower.
Yes, and we might see that if I can give a little bit of a spoiler. And so, the Russian army made it to Livonia, to the Livonian capital of Nerva. And so we're going to see them at Nerva. The Russians get to Nerva, but winter has arrived. They left in summer, but by the time they get to the city of Nerva, winter set in, and they want to take the city, but guess what?
What?
It is so cold their guns will not shoot.
Really? I didn't know it was possible to freeze gunpowder.
Well,
I know it's possible, but enough to where a spark won't set it off.
Yeah,
still.
It's so cold that their guns are basically useless, and so they dig in trenches in the frozen earth. And Russia lays siege to the city of Nerva. And Charles, he's now 18 by this point, because we are now in 100. He gathers his army of 10,000 men. Now, that is 1/4 of the size of the Russian army. He takes his army that's only 1/4 of the size of the Russian army and sets sail to Livonia. And then when they land, he personally leads them in a 150-mile march in winter.
150-mile march in winter?
Yes.
Near Russia?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
So when he gets to the city of Nerva, Peter the Great thinks, oh, it's winter, it's a blizzard, he just marched that far, there's no way he can prepare for an attack. So Peter the Great leaves. He goes back to do his business in Russia. But the Russians are amazed when they see the Swedish. They start lining up for an attack after marching all this time, and the army is so tired. But Charles, he's young, he's got energy. He's able to get them inspired. He gets them lined up and prepare for the attack. But the blizzard is blinding both sides. And so he's holding off because no one can see anybody. But then fate changes. The wind starts blowing against the Russians. And so now you have the Russians are blind and the Swedes can see. And Charles realizes this is his opportunity. And so he personally leads 2 divisions against the Russians. His army, that is 1/4 the size of the Russian army, attacks in the blizzard. And extra credits, a video series of extra history, the video series I keep mentioning, I love the way they described this attack. They said the Swedish soldiers attacked the Russians like wraiths. It was wraith-like, their attack from the snow. But again, the guns did not work, so it was blade and knuckle.
Wouldn't it be like more of a bayonet thing?
Yeah, that's what I said, blade. Bayonets, sword, fisticuffs. It's just a physical attack. And again, imagine you're one of the soldiers. You're probably worn out and tired from all this marching, but your king
is going with you, marching with you.
Not just with you, he's leading you.
And so basically, it's the thought process of, if this 16-year-old can do it, I should probably be able to do it.
Yeah. And so you're filled, and also think this is also a time where, the idea of a nation doesn't really exist yet. You're loyal to a family. And like the way it's structured in Europe is a pyramid. You've got the people who work the land, and they owe their allegiance to their lords that own their land. And those lords own allegiances to other lords, and you get this pyramid leading up to the monarchies. And there's a divine assumption about the monarchy that they're chosen by God. And so you see this person to you that's divinely chosen, leading your charge. That probably filled them with the energy and vigor to attack. And the Russians break. They start to retreat, and they start running in such terror that they're running blindly, and there's only one bridge to cross the river behind them.
Oh, I remember this part.
Yeah,
okay.
So all the Russians get on this bridge. They're trying to get across, but the weight is too much. The bridge breaks, and after all the snow is settled, 700 Swedish died. Around 8,000 Russians died. Charles lost about 7% of his army. Peter the Great lost 20% of his. It is an immediate victory for Charles and a huge blow to Peter. Peter's army is scattered to the winds, and now he has to prepare for an invasion.
I kind of want to talk about that bridge for a second, because
at
the time it was freezing cold water, and most people did not know how to swim. And that bridge was mainly composed of stone and wood, so there was not... If it broke completely. So, it's just this entire army kind of drowns almost. Part of the entire army drowns because they broke and ran and tried to get across this unstable... It wasn't unstable, but it wasn't designed to hold that much weight.
Yeah. And this is also an important thing to note. One of the reasons he's going to have this victory at the beginning, one of the reasons he's going to be so victorious here, is Sweden has a massive standing army. And in 1700, nations didn't really have a standing army. You would often have... kings would pull troops from their...
Wasn't it they would pull troops from the lords, and the lords would get it from their lands, right?
Yeah. Basically, you draft the peasantry, and so you don't really have massive standing armies all the time, and Sweden does. So even though Russia has so many more people, they do not have the trained, qualified, standing army of Sweden. And yeah, Russia has a huge blow, and Peter the Great is now trying to be on the defensive, and he's doing his best to pull together an army to defend an invasion from Sweden. And before Charles can do anything, while he's there in Nerva, he gets some interesting news. Before he makes his decision what to do next, he gets a letter, a note. The King of Spain has died childless. In his will, he left the Spanish throne to a Frenchman, think like the Count of Anjou, and they announced that the French and Spanish thrones would unite. Now, how do you think the rest of Europe handled that news?
They probably panicked.
Oh, yeah. England and the Holy Roman Empire lost it. They'd be tiny by comparison. No single navy matched the English, but unite French and Spain? Then that's the trouble for the English navy. The Holy Roman Empire was already ancient, clunky, and bloated. They would be no match for a united France and Spain, and there'd just be no balance of powers. So England teams up with parts of the Holy Roman Empire and Holland to form an alliance, and they waged war against France and Spain before they could unite. And we call that the War of Spanish Succession. And so now Charles finds out the West cannot care less about what he does.
They're too occupied with something else going on.
Yep. They cannot care less about what he does. And in fact, they tell him, quick, sign a peace with Russia and Poland, Lithuania, and then you can install your own puppet in Spain and ensure another long dynasty of Swedish domination in the world. But unfortunately or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, Charles only cared about one thing: punishing the two nations that transgressed him. He could not care less about what happens in Spain. So he ignored the people's advice regarding Spain, focused on enacting his vengeance. And so while Peter the Great pulls together a defense for an invasion never comes, Charles winters in Livonia. He winters in this city there and decides he needs to punish Poland, Lithuania first for invading them in the first place. In his mind, Russia's been punished enough. They're out for now. Let me go south. And this was controversial because, and if the rest of Europe was not wrapped up in a war, they may have intervened because, and this is where the politics of the time get confusing. Poland and Lithuania were technically considered independent in this war, or neutral in this war.
How was that?
Okay, so this is where it gets complicated. Remember how I said their King Augustus was also the elector of Saxony?
Yeah.
So when he declared war, he was speaking as the elector of Saxony. So even though troops are coming from Poland, Lithuania, it is technically only Saxony that's declared war here.
That's weird.
It is very weird. And so this is just where the politics gets confusing when you have a monarch who is someone who's the monarch of three separate countries, and he's drafting troops from all three countries, but he's technically only using the authority of one of.
That sounds familiar. I don't mean in that war, I mean in a different one. But I can't remember what.
Another country's going to pull the same card later, but I'm not going to spoil who that is.
Okay.
So, Charles plans to invade Poland, Lithuania. But this is where things spiral into a comedy of errors. Everyone knows where Sweden is going to attack. They're going to get on a ship and they're going to make an amphibious assault in this one place. Everyone knows it. The Russians know it. Everyone knows that's where it's going to happen. Everyone except for King Augustus of Poland, Lithuania, who's convinced it's going to happen somewhere else. And
reminds me a little bit of a thing with Hitler where people deceived him on where the Allies were going to attack in the Mediterranean instead of on the beaches of Normandy.
Oh yeah, and they even have inflatable tanks then and all of this. Yeah, but
just a little bit, not exactly, but a little bit, enough. Let's put it that way.
But when it becomes evident, the Poland Lithuania does put some troops there, and thankfully they have some Russian troops to back them up as well. And so now, yet again, Charles is facing an army multiple times larger than his own, and he's going to have to make an assault from the water and take the land, take the beach.
Which is harder because they're going to be, because I mean, you have the cannons on the ships, but the ships are floating there, so it's not exactly very accurate. And then the way they get troops to the land is through the dinghies, little rowboats type thing, where they are very exposed and can be shot either with cannon fire or with regular guns.
And let me add more to the problem. Sweden doesn't have any supplies for a campaign. They've been camped all winter in a besieged city. They don't have any supplies to support themselves on a campaign. But Charles, he has a plan. Their first wave, they fill small boats, Stevie, with damp straw and set it on fire. So they have a smoke screen. Now, clearly you see a smoke screen, the enemy knows that someone's coming. So their cannons open fire. So the Swedes put floating batteries. They put cannons basically in boats and start firing, and they have those cannons going towards the shore firing. And then, as you said, they get into dinghies, they get in their little boats, and the forces make their waves onto the beach. But guess who's in the very first boat of the very first wave?
King Charles, because he leads from the front.
King Charles XII. This mad lad kid is in the very first boat leading the battle. He is the very first soldier who's going to get off on those shores and lead the charge. And so again, you can imagine how this emboldens his troops and scares the enemy. Again, they see this, to them, divinely chosen leader leading the assault. And also, it was generally looked down upon for killing a monarch.
Yeah, because if you killed him,
You kill one monarch.
if you kill one monarch, then that means all of them are exposed. So to prevent that, whenever someone kills a monarch at that time, everyone else killed and tortured the person that killed the monarch knew.
Oh yeah, there's just a lot of things going through everyone's minds. And I just mean that to emphasize how much is happening. And so our mad lad Charles leads the first wave. They attack. The Lithuanians immediately break and retreat. Even though the Russians are larger, they beat them back. The Lithuanians regroup and come back in force. But that short time they took to regroup, Swedish reinforcements landed, and now Charles had the upper hand in both numbers and in both quantity and quality. So they make quick work of the Polish Lithuanians, and not only that, their supply problem is fixed too, because in the hurried retreat of the Polish Lithuanians, they leave all of their supplies behind. And so now, not only has he achieved victory, he has a starting place on land, and now he has the supplies to feed his campaign. Great work for him, terrible work for everyone else. And as his war goes, they start taking multiple Polish-Lithuanian cities. And in fact, there's a legend of one of the cities that he conquers. Charles goes up to the gates of the city himself and says, "Surrender." And when the soldiers just look at him flabbergasted of the city, legend says he personally pried open the gate and waved his soldiers in. And his soldiers, confused, not expecting this, grabs their unarmed or unloaded muskets, and 300 Swedish soldiers with unloaded muskets and canes capture an entire city.
Kind of reminds me of that one time when... never mind. Because I'm bringing up a bunch of World War II stuff because it just reminds me of it.
History, one guy, his name's Chris on the YouTube channel, Vlogging Through History, highly recommend. He has a saying, history does not repeat itself, but it rhymes.
Because there was this one dude, I think it was, what was it, Madman Jack, Crazy Jack, something like that?
Mad Jack Churchill.
Yeah, and he captured, what was it? He captured an entire town because he made up a huge ruckus and made the German soldiers think that there was a big force that was taking the town. And instead of it was just one guy.
It makes me also think a similar thing happened in the American Civil War. You have General McClellan of the North trying to invade the South. So they came from the shore, and I think he's trying to move towards Richmond. And he gets to a southern-held city. And there's trees and stuff. I don't exactly know the details. And so what the Confederate general does is he has their troops split into two and march back and forth between the trees to make it look like they're all separate divisions of one larger army, tricking McClellan into thinking he was facing a much larger army than he was. Now, McClellan had wasn't that great of a general. So I don't know if that would confuse many other people, but...
There was also this one other... There was a hunter from, I think it was Kansas, or maybe Kentucky, that, I think this was World War II. He was a hunter and ended up capturing 300 German soldiers. There's a movie about him. I can't remember the movie's name, though.
Whoa. Yeah, so that's... Legend has it he took that city. Now, there's a little discrepancies on if that particular story is true. Knowing what else this king does, I would not be surprised whatsoever if he really did that. We've got a teenage kid who says, yeah, it's a blizzard.
Well-
Guns won't work. Let's charge the enemy.
It's not that surprising because you see things like this throughout history.
Oh, yeah. But the cities he did conquer, they actually liked him. He would allow captured soldiers to return to their families. And instead of starving certain cities, he would drive cattle or he would drive livestock into the city for them to eat. But kill them with kindness. Win the hearts of the people so they say want to fight against you. And so he was actually liked. And when winter set in, and they winter in one of the cities there in Poland, Lithuania, he would take snowballs and break the windows of the houses his soldiers were staying in so they wouldn't get too used to comfort and luxury. And but you know what? They put up with it because he did it himself. They would put up with grueling tasks because they saw the example of their king who would take on the most grueling and most difficult stuff himself. And so after the winter abates and war continues, the Polish-Lithuanian force outnumbered the Swedes again 2-1 in a swampy battle. So in front of the Polish-Lithuanian troops is a marsh, like a big swamp. And this is good for the Polish-Lithuanians. That means the Swedish will be unable to bring their cannons through the mud without them getting stuck. And so they won't have artillery. So what does Charles do? He and his men use speed. They run through the swamp, they ride through the swamp, quickly break through the Polish-Lithuanian lines, takes their cannons and uses it against them. And so Polish-Lithuania, they are just falling beneath Charles. And he keeps winning. Even though he's constantly outnumbered, his men keep beating. And eventually, Charles XII deposes Augustus from the throne of the Polish-Lithuanian Empire, and he establishes his own puppet ruler. And so, in summary, to quote a friend of ours, Charles just clapped Poland-Lithuania.
Wow.
And by the way, at this point, it's 1704, he's our age, Stevie. So at this point, he's our age. He just clapped this king, deposed him. And Augustus, he's not happy about this. He is still determined, even though he's no longer even king, he still wants to have a hereditary monarchy. So he decides, how about I start a civil war? And so,
that'll work.
Yep.
That always works.
Yeah. If I couldn't hold on to my throne with
Might
all
as
of
well
our
shatter the country.
If I couldn't hold on to the throne with all of my armies, surely I can take it with only half. And so he starts a civil war against Charles's puppet king, but he also has a plan. Russia starts invading Livonia again. Russia is invading parts of Sweden, and here's the plan. As again, I'm just going to keep giving credit to extra credit. As the way they put it, their plan was to trap Sweden between the hammer of Poland-Lithuania and the anvil of Russia. And just they thought if they could hammer them between the two, they would surely win. But time, and I've got several battles here where I've described how Charles won, but for the sake of time, because I have no clue how long we've been recording, I'm going to quickly skip over the details of these battles and just summarize. Time and time again, the Polish, Lithuanians, and Russians had anywhere from twice to 10 times the size of Charles's army, but every time he beat them back. And eventually Augustus has to give up the civil war and signs a peace treaty and just gives up the fight for his throne. And so now Charles has beaten 2 of the 3 armies. Denmark, Norway is out, and now Poland, Lithuania is out. This just leaves the 2 most important leaders of the day to fight. Carolus Rex versus Peter the Great. Bum, bum, bum. And before Russia had fully won Swedish territory. So Russia's been trying to help Poland get Charles's army down there. But Peter the Great also realized this is his opportunity. Charles can't be everywhere at once. And so he's been able to take a little bit of territory in Sweden, and then before the war's over, before any formal declarations, Peter went ahead and built himself a new capital city on the Baltic called St. Petersburg.
Yep.
Definitely not named after himself. He totally wasn't trying to name it after himself. He definitely was only meaning to name it after Peter from the Bible. There's definitely not the intention of naming after himself. And I think the city is the same one that will later be called Stalin.
Yep. Stalingrad.
Stalingrad, yes, sorry. Which is
it's changed back to St. Petersburg though.
Yeah.
So
it's also been called Petrograd, I think, before, or I'm forgetting the other name for it. But yeah, St. Petersburg. So he creates a new capital on the Baltic so he could trade, which is a gutsy move, seeing the war's not over and he barely just got this territory. And do you think Charles XII is going to take that laying down?
Nope.
No. He and his generals discuss it, and his generals say, you know what? It'll be hard, and it'll be difficult, but we can take back St. Petersburg. And so Charles says, all right, keep your plans secret, keep them safe, and we're going to march and take it back. And they start marching, and they start marching. And hold up a second, Stevie. Haven't we been marching too long? Won't we've already gotten there? Wait a second, aren't we going a little too far north and a little too far east?
Oh, so you're saying they went the wrong way?
Oh, Charles didn't tell his troops, but he decided, no. Why take back territory? Why just keep fighting for this territory that keeps flipping back and forth? Why not march directly to Moscow and topple Peter himself?
This was before Napoleon.
Correct.
Right?
This is before Napoleon.
Yeah.
Napoleon will come 100 years later.
And he does the same thing.
And Hitler will do the same thing again much later. And so, much to the chagrin of his soldiers and generals, Charles is enthusiastic youthfulness. We're going to Moscow itself, and we are going to overthrow Peter. And they keep fighting Russians, and guess what? Charles keeps beating the Russians. But while Charles is still winning, it's getting harder.
Mm-hmm.
The Russians are no longer these peasants who have been recruited at the last second. They're now well trained. And now, for some of these battles, it's taking up to a month for the Swedish troops to recover from these battles. And during that time, Russia is not idle. Peter the Great's ordering for the land to be scorched. Grain and food that can be harvested and brought to Moscow, do it. If it can't, burn it.
It's the same thing they did in the Napoleonic Wars.
Scorch it so that Charles cannot live off the land and starve them out.
It's why Russia's never been taken.
Yeah.
Technically. Not modern Russia, but...
not since really the Tsardom.
Not since the Mongols, how about that?
Yeah, not since the Mongol Empire. They're the only ones who really were able to do it. And even then, the moment that Genghis Khan died...
It fell apart.
Yep. It fell apart. And so, even though this is cruel and heartless to his own people, Peter the Great is brilliant. And you know what? It's not just the Russians who do it. Russians might be the most famous, but the Gauls did that against Julius Caesar. As you said, Russia will do it against Napoleon. And the Texans did it against Mexico in the Texan War of Independence. It's the same thing. It's a common tactic. It's cruel. It may seem heartless, but it works. And Charles realizes this. He realizes he cannot keep on going like this. And so what do you think he decided? Be smart, return to Sweden, and build up an army to defend from a Russian invasion?
Nope.
He decides, you know what, we can't give up, but something's got to change. What if we go down to Ukraine? And Ukraine's not a separate country, but it's like a state and part of Russia. What if we go down to Ukraine and see if they'll help us? They're not necessarily the most friendly against the Tsar. And so Peter learns of this. And so Peter personally leads his own trained Russians like Charles does, because he's learning.
Mm-hmm.
Peter's learning. He's copying Charles' tactics. And so he personally leads his Russian army and reroutes Charles's reinforcements from Ukraine.
This is where they put Charles on the run.
Not quite. We're not there yet. But the reinforcements do go on the run, because when they have to retreat from Peter's army, they get to a river, and the bridge has been burned, and they realize they can't carry their cannons and their carts across the river.
Charles or Peter?
Charles's reinforcements. Charles isn't
Okay,
there.
yeah.
These are his Ukrainian reinforcements. And they realize, oh no, what do we do? And so the leader of these reinforcements makes the tough decision. Every man, carry what supplies you can, burn everything else. But guess what one of these major supplies was? Alcohol, because that keeps you warm. That's also clean liquid to drink. You need clean water, mix some alcohol in with it.
Because at the time, if they didn't really have clean water at the time, they still...
Oh, yeah.
Most things were... You drank alcohol because it was safe to drink.
It won't be till the late 1800s before germ theory is accepted.
Mhm.
So, yeah, clean water is not a thing. But you know what, Stevie? We just had a bad loss. We're on the run. We're going to have to dump this alcohol. Don't you think we should drink as much of it as we can before we dump it?
It's going to waste, so might as well drink some.
Yep, that's what these reinforcements did. And just to make a long story short, it's a chaos, and Charles XII will never see anything from those reinforcements. And so what does he do? Does he now finally turn back to Sweden, give up this campaign against Moscow because he knows he has no reinforcements coming from the Ukraine?
Of course not.
Of course not. You are so right. And so now he turns to the Kazakhs. And Ivan, the leader of the Kazakhs, tells Charles that he will give him, he has 30,000 cavalry that he will give Charles if Charles will overthrow the Tsar. What a great offer for Charles, right? Guess what happens?
It was more like, okay, what happens? I'll let you say it.
Peter the Great finds out
Mm.
about this rebellion from the Kazakhs, and he decides to punish them with an iron fist. They tie dead Kazakhs to crosses and float them down the river as a warning to all others who attempt to rebel against the Tsar. And so suddenly, after this, guess how many cavalry Charles ends up getting?
Not as much.
1,000.
I thought, what was it, extra credit?
Yeah.
Didn't they say it was 3,000?
Okay, so I skipped over some details. When Ivan tries to get the Kazakhs to rebel against the Tsar, only 3 of the 30,000 are willing to do that. And then when Peter the Great comes down with his iron fist to punish them,
2,000 die.
Yep. Only 1,000 eventually get to Charles. So you're right, I was trying to skip over some details for time's sake. But yeah, Charles' army is small and supplyless. And now, because of all this moving and all this running, their gunpowder has become waterlogged. And the men claim that they can see their bullets hit the ground 30 feet away after shooting.
That's pretty... I don't think you'd even kill Chipmunk with that.
Yeah, this is not good. So Charles eventually decides, you know what? We're near Poltava. Sorry, I'm not pronouncing this Russian city correctly. He decides, how about we go ahead and capture the city, and we'll rest there to recoup and regather resources. Here's the problem. General rule of thumb, if you're going to besiege and take a city, you need 4 to 5 times the amount of people of the army in the city, because it's a long waiting game. He doesn't have that. He has about, give or take, 800 troops at this point. He's got such a small army. But he decides, you know, I'm going to try to siege this city. And on top of that, despite the Russians coming to reinforce it, we're going to start digging trenches, and they're trying to dig tunnels underneath the city and blow up the walls so they collapse. Charles's luck is starting to really run out. As he's observing the trench being dug, a stray bullet flies and hits him in the foot. But Charles, this man, this myth, the legend, he keeps on going through the pain. But eventually that night, his soldiers see that he is pale as snow, and they force him to sit down, and they forcefully cut his boot off of him, and his foot is mangled. He will not be able to walk for the rest of the campaign. And so they will have to carry him up on the platform for the rest of the campaign. And now Russian soldiers have come to reinforce the city.
When we get over to when he dies, I have a couple of questions, because I don't know. I think something's off. Hold on.
We're still a little bit, spoiler alert, a little way away from his death.
Oh, I know.
And so they have to lift him up. And again, I've got a lot of pages of notes here. I'm kind of grazing over a lot of this. But just because there's so much to talk about this king. Anyway, the Russian forces are coming. They're there to attack. Charles, again, he doesn't tell them to retreat. His army of 800 men. He tells them... Or sorry, no, I'm getting ahead of myself. He has more than 800 men at this point. I'm sorry. I'm getting ahead of myself. He tells them to attack. And then not only attack the Russian forces, he says, men, on his platform, because he can't stand on his own now, he tells them to carry him up front to inspire the troops. Charles is up front, he's being carried, and the Russian fire opens, and his carriers are mowed down, and Charles falls to the ground.
I find it interesting that the people that were carrying his seat, like carrying him on the
Their
shoulder thing, they get shot, but the big old target in the middle of the air.
Because, again, that's a bargaining piece if you capture him.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, they die. He falls to the ground. One of his, I think it's lieutenants, rides up to, gets off his horse, and then loads Charles onto his horse and tells Charles to flee. And while he's telling Charles to flee, he is cut down and gutted in front of Charles. Charles flees on his horse, and now after this battle, he only has 800 soldiers. I was getting a little ahead of myself when I said he only had 800 men. Running away from Russia, now he only has 800 men. But here's a problem. They're too far away from Sweden. There's too many bodies of water. He can't get there. So he turns south and he rides towards the Ottoman Empire. Because the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And the Ottomans and Russians just finished a war. So he gets there, he rides. But as he's getting ready to cross into the Ottoman Empire, Peter's armies catch up to him and gut his 800 troops down to somewhere between 300 to 200 by the time they cross over to the Ottoman Empire.
Wait, I thought you said 800.
Yeah.
So 800 then run, then on the run, 500 die.
Yes.
And 300 get to the Ottoman Empire, and then the Russians kill 100 of them. No, wait, what?
After the battle, when Charles is on the run, he has 800 men after that slaughter. When he's trying to cross over into the Ottoman border, the Russians catch up and slaughter them so that only about 200 to 300 make it into the Ottoman Empire.
Okay.
And so they get over. The Ottoman Emperor is very kind to them. And in fact, he helps Charles build basically a self-governing colony inside the Ottoman Empire. He's like, yeah, happy to let you stay. But Peter the Great's like, hand over Charles or we're invading. And we got some people. Ottomans may have thought Russia was bluffing. Peter may have thought he's not going to call our bluff. Peter goes to invade. The Ottomans come to the attack. Peter's surrounded, and he's pretty much captured. But Peter's like, okay, how about we draw a deal? He's like, if I'm not going to win the battle, he's like, well, I'm going to win this peace treaty. He's like, how about this? If you let me go safely, we will let you do whatever you want with Charles and let him go safely. And the Ottoman's like, deal. We don't really want another war right now. That's fine. So Peter goes safely, and the Ottoman goes, hey, old Chucky, my friend, Charles, you're allowed...
Chucky Charles?
That's right. He's like, guess what? Russia's letting off, you can go back to Sweden. And he really should. He's lost almost his entire army, and he really needs to prepare Sweden for an invasion. Because at this point, all the sharks can smell blood, taste blood in the water. He really should go and shore up Sweden's defenses. But you know what Charles XII does?
Yes, because I've seen the...
Yeah. But humor me here.
Okay, what?
What? He tries to get the Ottomans to declare war. He's like, no, declare war and invade Russia. And they're like, no, my guy, we just earned you your freedom. Take it. And he's like, no, I'm not leaving. And so the Ottomans try to buy him out.
You can't make me.
Here's thousands upon thousands of pounds. Please leave. And Charles is like, okay, only if you pay me 8,000 more.
Didn't he get imprisoned for a bit because he got too heated with the Sultan trying to get him to...
Yes, you're right. The Ottomans get angry enough. They arrest all the Swedes. Once Charles and the Swedes' heads calm down, then he lets them back out and sends them back towards Sweden. Yeah, he's arrested, but it's more of a
You're in timeout.
That's right. You stand. It's more of a timeout than an arrest. And he finally gets to Sweden, and now sharks have tasted blood. Denmark declares war. Russia declares war. Our old buddy, old pal Augustus, is somehow able to claw his way back up into some power, overthrow the Swedish puppet, and he's king again, and he declares war. And guess who now wants to join the fight? The King of England. But he's not going to technically declare war through England. He is also the Elector of Hanover, because this is King George's dynasty, and so England England joined the war, but technically not through England, but through Hanover. Again, we get some more of these political shenanigans that the king trying to save face for one of his countries, but still,
It kind of reminds me of like legal loopholing.
it's like, yeah, that's exactly it. There's some weird loopholes. England's in this now, and Charles decides, guess we have to invade Norway now. He raises a massive army, starts to invade Norway, and you know what? He's having some good success. He and his troops, they're climbing over mountains, they're swimming across rivers. They're actually having some victories because, again, they're being inspired by their king leading them.
And at this point, his foot's healed.
Yeah,
so.
yeah. Like you said, his foot's healed. He's able to walk. They're digging. They prepared a trench around a city they wanted to besiege and take. And now they have a Frenchman who's helped join their army, and they light leaves on fire around the trench so they can see the city and see what's happening. Charles XII, he's looking out over the trench, looking at the city, and the Frenchman's telling him, "Your Majesty, this is no place for you, your king, to stick your head up." And he's like, don't worry. I've seen so much more. But the next morning, they'll find the king there with a bullet hole in his head. He's shot from peering over. And you can find a picture of his skull on Wikipedia. In the early 1900s, they exhumed his body and did an autopsy. And I don't know what the embalming process is for a monarch of Sweden at the time, but he looks like a human being. Like, he still has skin, he still has his nose, he still has some of his hair, but he's got a big hole in the side of his head. Sometimes we exhume these people from the past to see, did they really die of what legend says? But not much questioning.
A hole in the head that's from a bullet.
Yeah. But what were your questions that you said you had earlier, though?
Nothing. It was about the siege, because I didn't think he was sieging a place when he got shot in the foot. I thought it was a random battle with the Russians.
No, he was overseeing the digging of a trench because they're trying to...
Oh, yes, now I remember, yeah.
Digging holes under the city. But yeah, and I skipped over a lot of battle details there towards the end because I don't know how long we have been recording, but I know it's been a while.
I didn't have much input, so I don't know much about this period of time. I know more about World War I and World War II stuff.
Yeah. And
Napoleonic stuff. And this was like 100 years before.
This will influence this impacts why we get the Napoleonic Wars, why we get the First World War. Because after this, the throne goes to Charles's sister because he never married. And we know it's not that, because whenever a leader in history does not marry, people like to make guesses and assumptions. Oh, he must have been gay, or...
I think he was just too occupied with battle.
That's exactly it. In fact, we have letters he wrote to sons. It's not that I haven't seen any beautiful women I like. It's just basically, I'm too busy.
I don't have time.
Too busy making war.
Because he was a bit bloodthirsty.
Oh, yes. He was. But he let that go to his head. He had so many early victories that I think he let himself think he's invincible.
Kind of like Napoleon.
Yep. Here's the thing. If it wasn't for Russia, and he should have seen that coming, if he lost hundreds of thousands, if he hadn't lost so many soldiers due to the winter in Russia, because Napoleon did take Moscow.
Yeah, but he was forced out like a couple months later.
He wasn't forced out. He fled.
He had to go out because so many of his troops were dying. And
he's like
the Russian armor. Then
he has no food, and winter's there.
And the Russian army is coming back towards them.
Yeah. If he hadn't lost so much army troops there, I don't think he would have lost at Waterloo. If he had the amount of troops to support himself at Waterloo, I don't think he would have lost. But yeah, you're right. Napoleon let that go to his head, and he made some dumb decisions in Russia. And we see that time and time again. People making some really dumb decisions trying to invade Russia. You would think,
Because you kind of have to blitz them. You can't let them wait for winter.
oh yeah, you gotta find a way.
Which, it's funny how I said that, because Blitzkrieg comes from the Germans.
Yep.
Who failed to take Russia.
Yep. And Stalin was ruthless in that. He purposely he forced the civilians to stay in their cities because he thought the Russian soldiers would fight twice as hard if they were trying to protect their own wives and children. The Nazis were marching into cities like Stalin got. He's, you know what? I want to force the citizens.
They also didn't have that great of equipment.
Oh yeah, the fuel is freezing. The oil and gas is freezing in the tanks. Like, it's insane to try to think of weather like that.
I'm talking about the Russian equipment. Like, their tanks aren't as good. Their weapons aren't as good.
And there's the
it's like 100-1, but still.
And it's also famous. They tried to train dogs to blow up tanks, but the problem is, the Germans and Russians use different type of fuel. So the dogs they strapped bombs to went after the Russian tanks and not the German ones. And but yeah, there's a. But anyway.
No, Fluffy, not that tank.
Oh my word. Yeah. But yeah, Charles let it go to his head. But he's a mad lad.
And to be fair, he's been on, like, what was it, tens of battlefields.
Oh yeah. And he
only got harmed once, and it was in the foot.
Yeah. And
from his experience, he didn't have much to fear.
Yeah. He had great experience, and I can see why the people followed him.
Because he was out front. He led from the front.
It's the similar reason we're making a lot of comparisons to Napoleon, but that's one of the reasons the people followed Napoleon, because he wasn't born into it, but Napoleon earned his rank, and he would be right up there with the artillery, gunmen, getting mud sprayed on him in the battle in the thick of it. Not quite to the same degree that Charles XII, where he was the first man in the first boat of the first wave.
Mm-hmm. Whereas Napoleon was certainly in the battle, but he was in the back trying to get the view of it all and figure out what the best strategy was.
But yeah, and I think there's some lessons to be learned there from Charles. I think there's lessons of leadership, both good and bad, to be learned from him. The idea of not asking someone to do something that you're not willing to do yourself. He did that. But then there's also, we want to learn from his arrogance too. We don't want to be like that. But I think he is one of those forces of nature embodied in one person. Like, we see that throughout history. Those few people that are just, they in and of themselves are forces of nature. I think we see that with him. To make one last comparison, Napoleon, we see that with Napoleon. Caesar, Catherine the Great to a lesser extent. You can look at our forefathers here in America, or some of our founding fathers, and some of them I think would certainly be able to be identified as those few people throughout history are just forces of nature. That certainly circumstances were on their side, but I think even if circumstances were different, they would have found a way.
Would you consider the first Elizabeth I as well among those?
I don't know. And see, that could have been very different for...
She was the queen during Spain's, like, height of power.
Yeah. And part of that, she was also fortunate. She wouldn't have been queen if her sister didn't have some sort of... if Bloody Mary didn't have some sort of affection towards her. Because she could have been beheaded. But it seems like Bloody Mary had some sort of affection towards her sister and never had her killed. But
I was thinking more along the lines of later in her life.
That's true. Later in her life, yeah.
Because the UK does go to war with Spain at the time.
Yeah, that's true. And then I would put William the Conqueror there as one of the... Victoria, especially earlier in her life, was her mother was ruling and controlling over her, and she just broke free of that. And despite being the first monarch of England born without real power, she managed to shape Europe into her image.
It's called the Victorian Age for a reason.
Yeah. But
we don't call that Victorian Age in America. We call that the Gilded Age.
Yeah.
But when we refer to Europe, we call it the Victorian Age.
We're also American. We were also a lot more isolated back then too.
Well, yeah, because the American thought process at the time was America first, everyone else second.
Yeah.
And maybe France before everyone else.
Maybe.
To be fair, they have been our allies since the beginning of the United States, so.
That's true, but we also had some sour relations with them.
I know, but not
the
enough.
X, Y, and Z affair, and
Not enough to actually break away the.
And I love how two of our biggest land grabs in American history happened because other countries are like anyone but England. Napoleon sold us the Louisiana Purchase because don't want England to get it. Russia sold us Alaska because we're afraid England's going to try to find a way to get it. We don't want England to have it.
We like you American people more than England. You guys can have it.
But yeah, this war though.
To be fair, the UK did go to war with all people.
Oh yeah.
Pretty much the entire world.
Yeah. And they were able to pull it off because they had the Navy and they had a large economic empire. So they were able to keep money coming and they're able to keep the battles off of their shores.
Mm-hmm. The only time they were ever conquered was by William the Conqueror.
Yeah, the French.
Yeah.
But yeah, back to Charles XII, and this war in history is known as the Great Northern War. And at the end of this war, the world will not be the same. Sweden will never again be a world power. And after this war, the Russian Senate votes and declares Peter the Great the first emperor of the Russian Empire. And now this will make Russia one of the world powers. Her luster will fade, and it will come back a little bit with Catherine the Great in a short period of time, but then after Catherine the Great, it will really
crumble.
It will crumble until Tsar Nicholas is executed.
And then it'll become the Soviet Union.
Yep.
Which was also a world power.
And so
and then it'll become the Russian today.
And you can see that the consequences of this war, like all these dominoes that kind of lead together and build towards.
Well, that's history.
Yeah. And that's one of the reasons I love history, to help us understand the world today. But Stevie, I know what you're about to say. And yes.
Do you? Because I don't.
And yes, that really happened.
Oh, yeah, that. Okay.
Thank you for listening to Yes, That Really Happened. Yes, That Really Happened is an absurd history podcast about those occasions when history is greater than fiction. All the wonderful music you've heard was written and performed for this podcast by the talented Corey Bowers. Links to articles and sources used can be found in the show notes. If you would like to write in with a topic or correction, you can find our email linked in the show notes as well. You can listen to all episodes on YouTube, Spotify, or your preferred podcast platform. If you would like to help the show out, please subscribe, like, rate, and review us on Apple Podcasts, but most importantly, share us with a friend. Thank you for listening. Hey, Stevie, you want to know a secret?
What?
We're recording.
We are?
Yep.
Okay.
You ready?
Kind of. I was doing something, but yeah, sure.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, I was just... No, go. Go ahead.
Okay, day.